Welcome to another episode of the Retirepreneur podcast. I'm your host with this week's executive summary for busy entrepreneurs building their second act business. Today's episode is designed for maximum impact in minimum time. And picture this. You've got 30 years of corporate mastery just sitting in your head.
Right.
You've managed crises, scaled departments, navigated just brutal market shifts, yet the traditional financial industry looks at all of that and basically tells you your net worth is tied entirely to your 401k balance.
Yeah, which is, that's where the anxiety starts for most people in their 50s and 60s.
Exactly. So today, we're tearing up that conventional balance sheet. We're doing a deep dive to extract the 3 most actionable insights for experienced professionals who want to turn those decades of expertise into a second act business and do it without risking their retirement security.
Because almost every conventional conversation about retirement, it kicks off with this single, usually panic-inducing metric, right? The savings number.
Yeah, the elephant in the room.
Yeah. But we are flipping that script today. The goal is to focus on the most overlooked, undervalued asset on your balance sheet, which is your own professional expertise. But to do that, we kind of have to look at the math of why the old model is breaking down.
Let's lay out that reality. Because to understand why building a business at this stage isn't just a nice hobby, but a strategic move, we have to face the structural reality. People feel like their traditional assets are vulnerable right now, and they aren't imagining it, are they?
They absolutely aren't. The numbers tell a really sobering story here. The latest data shows that today's retirees have a median of just $71,000 in total savings.
Wow, $71,000.
Yeah, and that excludes home equity. But as far as liquid capital goes, $71,000 is the median, and the median household income is sitting right around $55,000.
That's tight.
It gets more concerning. When you zoom out, 1 in 5 adults age 50 and older have absolutely no retirement savings. Zero. Yeah. So it's no wonder that 61% of adults in that bracket actively worry about running out of money.
I always have to jump in when we share those numbers.
Yeah.
Because the immediate reaction for so many listeners is this heavy wave of guilt.
Oh, sure.
They hear that median savings and think, I should have skipped more lattes back in 1998. They internalize it as a failure of discipline.
And that guilt is entirely misplaced. What we're looking at is a structural reality, not a moral failing, because no standard spreadsheet built 30 years ago could have predicted today's economic landscape.
Yeah, right.
First, we're looking at lifespans that routinely stretch retirements to 25 or 30 years. That's unprecedented.
You're funding a third of your life.
Exactly. Second, you're dealing with healthcare costs that have completely detached from standard inflation. They just break the models that most calculators rely on.
Yeah.
And third, Social Security cost of living adjustments simply do not keep pace with real-world price increases at the grocery store.
No, they definitely don't.
So that gap between what you have and what you need, it's a mathematical reality of our era.
Which brings us to our first major insight, really, a massive paradigm shift. If traditional savings aren't enough to bridge a 30-year gap, we have to look elsewhere.
Right.
And that means reframing your expertise as an undepletable financial asset.
This is where the magic happens. You have to stop thinking of your expertise as just a resume builder and start recognizing it as a literal functioning financial asset.
Yeah.
In strict accounting terms, an asset has 3 characteristics. It generates income, it can be deployed repeatedly, and it's never consumed or depleted by its use.
And expertise meets all of those.
Perfectly.
Let me put an analogy to that because the distinction is just incredibly powerful. Think about it like this. If I pull $5,000 out of my 401k to pay for a vacation, that money is gone forever, right?
Gone.
The account shrinks. I lose the compounding interest. If I charge a company $5,000 for a strategic consulting project, my brain doesn't lose any knowledge. The account doesn't shrink. In fact, by solving a new problem for that client, the asset actually gets sharper for the next one.
But the conventional financial planning industry completely misses this. There's no line item on a net worth statement for, 35 years of industry-specific problem solving.
Right. Yeah.
So people spend decades generating immense value for employers, millions of dollars, and then at retirement, they just walk away from it. But the open market strongly disagrees with that. The market places a massive premium on what you've built.
Okay, I have to push back a little here, though. The math makes sense. But practically speaking, there's a huge psychological barrier. A 30-year executive doesn't just wake up and know how to market themselves.
No, they don't.
For decades, they had this massive corporate umbrella. An email carried weight because it said, Sarah from IBM.
Yeah.
How do you actually detach your expertise from that brand and sell it as a standalone product?
That identity detachment is often the single hardest part of the transition. You lose the corporate email and you feel like you've lost your armor.
Yeah, exactly.
The key is to stop marketing your past title and start marketing the specific problems you solve. When you worked for IBM, you weren't paid for your title. You were paid because you systematically eliminated friction or generated growth.
So you have to audit your own history.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Did you specialize in turning around toxic HR departments? Did you streamline supply chains during crises? That specific capability is your product. You're no longer Sarah, VP of Operations. You're Sarah, the person who cut supply chain waste by 20% in 90 days.
I love that. You transition from selling a title to selling a transformation. But here is where most people freeze up. They realize their expertise has value, but they have no idea what to charge or how much they actually need to work.
Which is a math problem.
Right. And that leads us to insight 2. Calculate your exact monthly gap before making any business decisions.
You cannot possibly choose the right business model without knowing your precise target. The actionable step here is simple, but it requires brutal honesty. No napkin math. You take your total projected monthly fixed income, Social Security, pensions, guaranteed distributions, and subtract your actual monthly expenses. And by actual, I mean pulling 3 months of real spending data from your bank statements.
The scary part.
Yeah, no guessing allowed. The difference between those two numbers is your gap.
Let's use an analogy here. Think of your fixed income as the foundation of a house. It covers the plumbing, electricity, the structural walls, your absolute essential living expenses.
Right.
If you want to actually live comfortably, build a nice living room, you have a gap to fill. Your business is the hammer you use to build the rest of that house.
Huh.
But I have to ask, staring down a monthly shortfall sounds absolutely terrifying.
It can be.
If someone has had a steady paycheck for 3 decades, asking them to rely on consulting to pay their mortgage seems like a recipe for panic. Doesn't calculating this gap just discourage people?
I see people face that terror all the time, but knowing the exact number is the opposite of discouraging. It's deeply clarifying. Yeah. The anxiety almost always comes from the unknown, that vague sense of not having enough. Once you isolate a specific dollar amount, it ceases to be a monster in the closet. It becomes a strategic target.
Ah, I see.
If you run the numbers and your gap is small, say $1,000 a month, you have a long runway. You can take your time.
Build a slow burn business.
Exactly. But if the gap is large, say $6,000 a month, that dictates reality. You can't spend 6 months building a website. You need a model that generates revenue immediately. It anchors every decision.
And they shouldn't just try to do this in their heads, right? Because taxes, inflation, healthcare, it's complex.
Very complex. You want to use a tool built specifically for the nuances of this life stage. The platform highly recommended for this is Bolden.
Bolden.
Yes. Listeners can find it at retirepreneur.linkbolden. It accounts for complex variables at 55 plus, the timing of claiming Social Security, realistic healthcare cost trajectories, Medicare premiums. It's a true retirement income planning tool.
Okay, so a listener has faced the math. They use the tool. They know their gap is exactly $3,500 a month. Which brings us to insight 3. Match your business model to your gap.
Right.
How do they match their expertise to the right model?
Let's break down the 3 primary models, starting with the fastest path to cash. Consulting.
Okay.
Consulting is active income. You deliver specific answers to specific problems. Because you bring senior level expertise, it commands the highest hourly or project rates. If you need to close a large immediate gap, this is your vehicle.
Let's define a term we hear a lot now. Fractional executive. That wasn't really mainstream 15 years ago. We're essentially talking about a company renting a C-suite executive, right?
That's a perfect description. A fractional executive steps into a role like a CFO on a part-time retainer basis.
Makes sense for the company.
Huge sense. A mid-sized business might need high-level financial strategy, but they can't afford a $250,000 salary plus benefits. So they hire you for 10 hours a week at $150 an hour. They get your 30 years of crisis management at a fraction of the cost, and you hit your $3,500 monthly gap with just 1 or 2 clients. Win-win.
Okay, so consulting and fractional work are about delivering the answer. What's the second model?
Coaching. It's adjacent to consulting, but fundamentally different. A consultant delivers answers and does the heavy lifting. A coach guides clients to discover their own answers.
Ah.
It's fantastic for recurring revenue through retainers, but it requires a huge psychological pivot.
Let's dig into that pivot.
Yeah.
Say we have a former HR director with 30 years experience who wants to start an executive coaching business.
Yeah.
Where do they get stuck?
They get stuck because their entire career conditioned them to be the answer giver.
Oh, right.
As a director, you're paid to walk into a messy room and say, here's how we fix this. You're rewarded for directives. But in coaching, if you just give the answer, you're robbing the client of the development they're paying for.
So they have to bite their tongue.
Exactly. Instead of saying, fire that toxic manager, she has to ask, what is the cost to your culture if you leave them in place for 6 months? It's a transition from directive to facilitative.
I see how consulting and coaching work for immediate cash flow. But they still tie your time to your income, right?
They do.
Is there a way to decouple that? Because if I'm 62, I might want to travel, but not scale back my revenue.
That desire leads perfectly to the third model, building a course, cohort, or community business. It's highly scalable. You build the intellectual property once and sell it infinitely.
But there is a catch.
A huge catch. It requires a massive upfront investment of time.
Let's clarify cohort quickly. A course is usually pre-recorded videos, but a cohort is different.
Yes, a cohort is live, time-bound, and community-driven. Instead of static videos, you might take 20 managers through a 6-week live leadership boot camp.
Higher price point.
Much higher. But, and this is a crucial warning building an audience to buy that takes a long time. If you have a pressing gap to fill next month, this is not the place to start.
Good to know. Now, I want to tackle a major mental block here. The flawed conventional wisdom that starting a business in your late 50s puts you at a massive disadvantage.
Oh, the tech bro myth.
Right. People think the market only wants to fund 25-year-olds in hoodies.
We need to dismantle that with hard data. The Kauffman Foundation cracks this, and 25% of all new entrepreneurs in the U.S. are between 55 and 64.
A full quarter.
Yes. And Bureau of Labor Statistics data shows 36% of all independent contractors are 55 or older. You're not an outlier. You are the demographic driving the independent economy.
Why is the market favoring the older demographic for this work, though?
Because of risk mitigation. When a company faces a supply chain collapse, they don't want a 28-year-old with a slick PowerPoint deck.
Right.
They're desperate for someone who managed through the 2008 crisis, navigated the dot-com burst. Your age and experience are not liabilities. They are your primary competitive advantages.
That is incredibly empowering. But what if someone does the math and their gap is zero? They've saved, well, pensions cover it. Is there still a reason to build a business?
Absolutely. The financial gap is only one piece. Transamerica did a study on this demographic and found 75% of people working past 65 do it for healthy aging reasons.
It's about preservation.
Exactly. Mental acuity, professional identity, social engagement. You don't operate at a high frequency for 35 years, wake up at 65, turn your brain off, and just stare at a golf course.
No, the drive doesn't evaporate.
Not at all. Legacy and engagement are just as valid as income optimization. And whether you're building a practice for income or just to mentor the next generation, the structural mechanisms are the same.
And this need for a structured path is exactly why Kurt Rose founded Retirepreneur.
Yes.
He recognized experienced professionals needed a space free from the 20-something hustle culture to navigate this transition.
Right. And listeners can find the frameworks we've discussed, templates for detaching their identity, and tools for this journey at the Retirepreneur Hub.
Which is at retirepreneur.com/Shri Retirepreneur-Hub.
Exactly. It's designed to help you organize that lifetime of raw expertise into a structured, market-ready asset.
I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. Think about the absolute biggest, most complex problem you consistently solved over your 30-year career in exchange for a salary. What if that exact problem is the highly paid solution an entirely different industry is desperately searching for today? That's your executive briefing for this week. If you found value in these insights, share this episode with fellow retirepreneurs and subscribe to the Retirepreneur newsletter at retirepreneur.com. Follow us for weekly strategic insights, and remember, your most successful chapter is just beginning. Until next week, keep building.